autumn is also the time when our heroine finally succeeds in leaving home and hitting the road. Today, I will tell you the story of a girl who was born as a second child and was hardly loved by both humans and nature. After countless hardships, she has finally arrived at her destination. Now, she must meet the person she needs to meet. The heroine tightly rolled up her sleeves. It was a bit chilly in the far north, so this simple coat felt a bit cold, but since she had arrived, she had to go in. This final journey needed to be a bit more meaningful. The person she needed to meet was the powerful duke of the northernmost province of the empire. Upon hearing news of his fiancée coming to meet him, his pen paused, eyebrows furrowed in discomfort, eyes filled with disdain. "What are you saying? This handsome but rude man is Duke Mion of the Jina region. He is annoyed because the steward reported that his fiancée from the capital is rushing here." Mion asked the steward, "If I'm not mistaken or temporarily forgetful, our wedding is still a year away, right? We are already engaged, so why she comes here?" With tact, the steward assured him, "My lord, you are not mistaken." He reminded the duke that the visitor had waited quite a while and perhaps it would be appropriate to greet her and see what she wants. Mion angrily slammed the table. "This is madness. Is she so bored that she comes here to stir up trouble? Even if we are engaged, she should have sent a letter ahead before coming here. Moreover, why come at such a busy time?" The steward also found it difficult, unsure how to advise the hot-tempered duke. His nature was as fiery as ever. Now, in winter, preparations for the people in the territory had to be complete, including provisions, medicine, and warm clothing for illness prevention. He also had to go out to drive away evil spirits because this season they come out in great numbers to seek food. Mion's blood boiled. That person, that fiancée, what was she thinking coming here at this hour? She must be idle and restless. Mion walked into the reception room, grumbling and cursing without regard for whether the guest could hear, because he was naturally brash. After cursing, Mion turned back to the steward. "Should I just break off the engagement? Would it be reasonable now? Find some reasons, anyway, we're only newly engaged." Of course, the protagonist Mion didn't need to wait for the steward to get an answer anymore, as someone inside had already replied. Cassina, the frail girl from earlier, had been standing in front of the duke's mansion for hours waiting for him to come out. Naturally, she also heard the duke's exclamation, a man who had always shown his dislike openly, regardless of whether it was towards men or women. Mion couldn't believe it and furrowed his brow, asking again, "What did you just say?" Cassina smiled gently and affirmed, "I said I agree to the annulment, but with a condition. That is, let me stay here for half a year or even 10 months. That should be enough time for me to do what I desire." Both were in the same building, yet their personalities seemed completely opposite. Mion showed disdain and asked Cassina, "Do you really think I would agree? Where do you get such confidence? Are you out of your mind?" Cassina smiled knowingly, disregarding his annoyance, and confidently stated, "I don't need to stay in this mansion, you just need to give me some corner of your domain." Looking at this girl, Mion initially thought she was just causing trouble for fun, but something seemed off. It felt like everything had been predetermined. But there was one crucial question. Mion looked down at her and asked seriously how long it took her to get here. Seeing her ragged, dirty, and visibly patched up clothes, he asked sternly, "Is the duke's estate really in such dire straits?" Cassina tilted her head in confusion. Mion scoffed, "If not, how can a girl like you come here without any servants or luggage?" Cassina casually replied, "I intentionally brought nothing because I was afraid of encountering trouble on the way." Mion asked seriously, "The journey is that far? How did you manage?" When the duke asked, Cassina truthfully answered, "It took me 2 months to get here." Her expression showed no fear, as if she had just walked over from the neighboring house. "But don't worry," Cassina chuckled excitedly, "I traveled by horse, so it was very safe. There was a shocking part with the horse, but it was fine. If the horse couldn't pass, I walked to sightsee, which was extremely convenient. Then I changed horses and took another 2 months to get here." Mion erupted, cursing in frustration, "Are you insane? Did you really come here alone? Aren't you afraid of dying? Why didn't you contact me even once? And why would a noblewoman like you not hesitate to come here? You're either incredibly naive or incredibly bold." A trace of sadness appeared in Casina's eyes, but she quickly concealed it. She explained, "I'm not the kind of person who does whatever she likes, but I'm traveling. This is my first and probably my last trip. I'm seeing many things I've never seen before, from picturesque rivers and mountains, verdant landscapes to how beautiful the iris flowers will bloom, and the cool and refreshing streams. Even the greedy little squirrels come out to greet me. The color yellow is also what I remember the most." Every time Casina changed carriages, a new landscape would unfold before her eyes. From flocks of migrating birds to squirrels busily filling their burrows with pine cones and chestnuts in preparation for the coming winter. Mian misunderstood Casina's intention, thinking that surely no noble lady would dare to travel so recklessly twice. Casina smiled and asked, "Now, will you let me stay here? Just for half a year or 10 months? Mian challenged her in return. "And what if I don't let you stay? Winter here is not a place for you to play around." Casina thought for a moment and then answered sincerely and innocently, "If you don't let me stay, I'll move to plan B, which is to do odd jobs, and then you can give me a temporary place to stay. After that, I'll continue exploring the surroundings." After speaking, Casina secretly observed the colorful expressions of the Duke. It was a bit miraculous. Mian held his forehead, wondering what had brought this naive girl all the way here without a scratch. And she even has a plan B. I must be going crazy. He discreetly looked at Casina to see if she was the one he had once been engaged to. At that time, she was very obedient, almost like a soulless doll. He hated that. It annoyed him so much that just looking at her fake smile, ready to smile whenever told to, was like looking at the flowers on her head. Mian pouted, looking displeased, and just then Casina caught the Duke's gaze. She returned his look with a lifeless smile, one that didn't quite mean anything. Mian doubted his memory. He wasn't sure if she was the stubborn type back then. At that moment, she smiled and said, "You will have to agree, right?" Looking at the girl with her determined eyes, Mian was a bit puzzled. He asked, "Why are you so sure?" "I could throw you out immediately. Because I know you hate me." A short statement, but it showed that she had accepted being hated. Casina pulled a piece of paper from her cloth bag, saying that she had also brought the annulment document with her. "It's already signed, so I'm sure you don't want to lose this document, do you?" Mian was at a loss for words. Really? She had trapped him, leaving him no way out. He sighed, "All right, do whatever you want. Now I'll have the steward prepare a room for you, so just wait," Mian said. Casina gave a faint smile and thanked the Duke. She promised that she would live as invisibly as possible, but if one day you don't see me, just think that I have gone back. Just think that you have finally gotten rid of a nuisance. Gently stroking the annulment paper, Casina severed her own thread of fate. Facing him was a girl who looked small and delicate on the outside but spoke in a somewhat negative manner, contrasting with her giggling demeanor. Mian felt a bit uncomfortable. He didn't know why, but there was something very bothersome about this contradiction. That girl remained the same, always smiling even though it was somewhat heartbreaking, right? Looking at Mian, Casina felt quite relieved. This person, although he hated her, perhaps more than anyone in the world, at least agreed to let her stay and do as she wished. Thus, she stayed with the fiancé who hated her most in the world. And why was she here? To understand that, we need to go back a little over 2 months, before she made the arduous journey to this northern place. Casina had a family, with both parents, and they were indeed her blood relatives. As usual, during every meal, Casina's presence was minimal. Everything revolved around one person, her younger sister, Abelia. Abelia was a cheerful and innocent girl, but she was often ill. At the dining table, their mother and father would always encourage her to eat more and take her medicine because she was the frailest in the family. Her brother Infant would bring her gifts to cheer her up, saying she had it tough. Even Casina's mischievous younger brother would pout because his youngest sister's medicine was very bitter. He would also ask for gifts from Infant out of jealousy towards Abelia. Their mother chuckled and playfully scolded both siblings that they had to take their medicine properly, or else Born, the third son of the family, would have to take it for Abelia. Of course, they were just teasing, appearing very much like a happy family of 5. Certainly not including the protagonist, Casina. The reason? There was no particular reason. It wasn't because of her bloodline or talent. A question always lingered in her mind, even haunted Cassina. Why was she the odd one out in this house? Even in family photos, why was she the only one with brown hair, while everyone else had blonde? Recently, she discovered the truth. She inherited a dormant gene from her grandparents, making her look like cuckoo chicks live in the nests of other bird species, an outsider no better than anyone else. Cassina looked at a familiar scene and quietly left the table, asking for permission to go outside. She kept her head down to avoid anyone noticing. Cassina's mother calmly accepted her as if she were a guest. Help yourself. Cassina sadly laughed inwardly, walking gently and quietly out, sighing softly, closing the door behind her with a heavy heart. Day after day, like an outsider even among her own flesh and blood, Cassina grew colder, wandering back to her room. They still didn't care about her, but it didn't matter anymore for her more. And in the bathroom, Cassina vomited everything clean, even dry heaving, her face pale but without a sound because she was used to it. But wasn't it said that her condition would slow down at least a little? Now it had deteriorated to this extent, with her bouts of nausea and vomiting lasting quite long. This had been going on for a few days. Finally, she knew what was wrong with her. Cassina had seen a doctor, and of course, she had to go alone. The doctor was extremely puzzled by her condition, even suggesting that it must have been divine intervention that allowed her to get there. Essentially, the functioning of her body's organs was only at half capacity, like a patient paralyzed on one side. The fact that Cassina could walk was already a miracle. Hard for her to believe as she questioned why her health suddenly faltered. The doctor provided a special diagnosis, an art illness. Cassina was emotionally shaken, facing a rare or even incurable condition. It seemed as though fate had never favored her. Lips trembling, repeating, fingers clutching her dress tightly. The mental shock Cassina endured now was immense. It was a condition reserved for those born with innate talents, regardless of physical form, capable of miraculous feats akin to divine creation. Some devoted their lives to harnessing such talents. The doctor asked Cassina, "Have you also created miracles?" Cassina's eyes dimmed, despondent. She painfully admitted. The doctor inquired further. "Each use of your ability weakens the body. Haven't you been regularly monitoring your health? If you had known sooner, the situation wouldn't be this severe. And your family doesn't know?" Cassina fell into a deeper silence. They knew, but their attention was reserved for what they saw as the cherished children. She quietly nodded to the doctor. Cassina now felt profoundly discouraged. In truth, she never shared her condition with her family, for they had never listened. Even when she attempted to communicate through her art, their rejection made her decide to keep silent, preserving some remaining dignity. It wasn't hatred, more like other parents, they were fair in their treatment. But their concern skewed towards someone ill, constantly medicated and unable to eat proper meals. So gradually, their care became skewed. Even a simple touch became difficult, let alone caregiving. Moreover, Cassina wasn't the youngest or the oldest, but a middle child, neither here nor there. Their level of care dwindled to almost nothing. Cassina's physical strength was now so weak that even lifting her arm was a strain. Honestly, at this stage, it was akin to the final stages of cancer. She had a small, fragile thought: if she revealed her illness, would they show pity or concern? It was a cynical world. Would they care about her illness or her innate talent for their own gain? The doctor diagnosed her at a stage now, with symptoms like anemia, nausea, and bleeding. He sighed as he looked at the medical record. At her age, telling a young girl like this was surely shocking. Cassina's time could only be measured by a calendar. She would have to endure pain and suffering from being unable to eat or drink anything. More seriously, it would last a year or less, until her death. Truly, fate always seemed to push her to the brink, a situation she had grown accustomed to. Perhaps this was a gift for Cassina. Upon hearing the news, she indifferently asked a key question: is there any other way to live? And of course, the doctor had no solution. It was an incurable disease. However, knowing how cruel this was for a young lady, he tried to comfort her, saying there were ways to extend her life as much as possible. If you wish, come to see me for follow-up exams, he said. Indeed, upon learning about her condition, her mind wavered a bit, but now Cassina felt more at peace. If her fate was already sealed with death, should she do something about it, or just wait to die? Sitting by the window, today's sun warmed Cassina's mood slightly. She watched the birds flying outside and suddenly thought, if she had wings too, how wonderful it would be to fly freely and explore everything outside. The blackbird also looked at the young girl nearing the end of her life, giving her a bit of motivation so her final moments could be as she wished. Could this be the divine redemption for giving this young one too much unhappiness? Cassina's mindset changed, thinking why she should bear the burden until death. If she knew in advance, she would make her last breath meaningful. There were many things out there just for joy, but for Cassina now, just breathing was precious. She wouldn't be shackled by her older brother, younger sister, or parents anymore. She didn't want to be trapped in this family like a dog they didn't bother to look at unless they had something new to blame. Could she go somewhere to enjoy her time on Earth? Should she tell her family beforehand? How would they look at her if they found her difficult to handle? What then? She imagined them starting to lecture her because her older brother had to stay and her younger sister couldn't leave, which she found utterly repulsive. At that point, she might even feel embarrassed. Cassina leaned her face against the wall, telling herself she would be fine without saying anything. If she didn't want trouble, yet she had to go somewhere, Cassina was determined. However, reality was far from easy. If only there were someone in this world to care for her during this final stage, whether out of love or disdain, as long as someone noticed her in last year. Cassina's wish so small, but despite being in a wealthy family with many siblings, she had never been cared for by a loved one. Just then, a figure crossed her mind, someone who openly disliked her but still cared. That person had once mocked her, calling her useless and only doing what others told her to do. She was stunned. He was irritable, blunt, and rude, but he knew how to care someone. He often said, all you could do was listen to others advising you? If you lacked motivation, you shouldn't go out. He was truly despicable, but at least sometimes strangers can be kinder than family. Cassina felt the moment he awakened her from her chains was still clear. In her decision, she resolved to go north to find him. He surely wouldn't refuse. At 17 years, the age broke the bull's horn, and this time, she would do what she liked, walk on her own feet, and breathe as she wished. She picked up her backpack and set off. That's why she decided to go to the mansion of her future fiancé in the extreme north of Mion. But what should she prepare before that? The next day, Cassina started planning her trip, listing everything meticulously on paper. First was exchanging gold coins for convenience, then a set of clothes and dried food. Anything else? She realized she also needed a cancellation of engagement document. She noted it down to avoid forgetting. A year-long journey awaited her, including the senator, but she probably didn't need to search. Speaking of the senator, Cassina's mood calmed briefly. She often missed meals without anyone looking for her, not even the servants. Her mood was dim, not sad or hurt, but slightly lonely. Shaking her head to clear her mind, Cassina decided not to dwell any longer. She only had a week to prepare everything, including money. She also packed the only gift her mother had given her, of course, before her younger siblings were born. Cassina got her bag ready and went to buy a few things, including finding a doctor. Passing the long mirror in the room, it reflected everything Cassina had to see and acknowledge since childhood, the petty discrimination. Since she became a teenager at family parties, she was like a shadowy figure in a theater. No one remembered who she was, but once the young ladies came to attend a family party, they clung to ask her brother because they had just seen the two of them talking to each other. No one remembers who she is, but for instance, once at a family party, the young ladies crowded around to ask about her brother because they saw them talking. Of course, she knew he was her own blood relative. But as soon as they heard his name, they started getting excited again. They praised the Duke and Duchess as wonderful, because they had given birth to such an outstanding child like Infix. Infix was a talented man in both literary and martial arts, handsome, wealthy, and talented. It's said he's capable of succeeding the family, and many noble young ladies have sent him love letters. When talking about this family's children, they can't forget Borden, a cute and lively boy with many friends. However, the most famous is still the beloved daughter of the house, a girl with golden curly hair and sparkling blue eyes like an angel, the center of everyone's attention. But they regret that when she was beautiful, she was also weak. Ksina always had to witness scenes like this, sometimes truly wishing those people didn't exist, or that she herself didn't have to stand here as a backdrop for others. Meanwhile, others, after being reminded 5 or 7 times, would finally remember this brown-haired young lady from this house. They wouldn't even remember her name, just vaguely recalling that she was from a commoner family. As she turned around, Ksina was already gone. She didn't want to stay here any longer. Ksina's memories were all filled with unpleasant things, a part of what was slowly killing her emotionally and physically. The commoner daughter Ksina was the label others used to refer to the second daughter of this house. Ksina wandered through the mansion, preparing to leave, hoping for a peaceful day, but fate seemed to enjoy teasing this young girl. Just as she reached the staircase, reminiscing about the time when she was scolded by her parents for not enjoying that silly party, she encountered her sister Abelia's doctor. Ksina recognized him as Norshare, someone she secretly admired. Her heart ached, she knew why. Despite being around him, she never went to him for treatment herself. Norshare greeted Ksina with a bright smile, asking her, "What brings you here today?" Ksina remained cold, he always smiled like that, especially when talking about Abelia. Meanwhile, she felt foolish, trying to be gentle and positive in his presence, yet he only seemed to care about Abelia. Ksina sometimes wondered if her impending death and Abelia's frail health were somehow similar. Every action of Knocker seemed to crush Ksina's heart. As she brushed past him, she curtly said, "Go inside and check on the girl quickly." Suddenly, Knocker noticed Ksina's pale complexion. Following his usual doctor's concern, he asked, "You don't look well today. Are you feeling okay?" Ksina smiled inwardly, realizing it had been over a month since he had noticed anything about her. Ksina replied nonchalantly, "It's nothing, just a bit tired from lack of sleep." Knocker chuckled again, saying, "Ksina, you could come for a checkup with Abelia, since I'm about to see her anyway." Everything seemed to revolve around her frail, sickly sister. Meanwhile, the person Ksina liked only casually suggested she could come along for a checkup with her sister. Just then, Ksina was startled by the sound of hurried footsteps approaching down the corridor. Who would dare to run around this house? Only the youngest children born and Abelia would. In this case, it was her youngest sister who was most pampered. Ksina was surprised by her sister's actions as she rushed towards her. Abelia threw herself into Ksina's arms, calling her affectionately, "Big sister." The scene, though seemingly happy, wasn't so for the person standing here, who wasn't on the brink of death. Since this was a staircase, the sudden tumble made Ksina panic, she couldn't resist as the doctor had warned. Knocker quickly supported her from behind, preventing both from falling. But Ksina understood more than anyone, he was simply afraid Abelia would fall and struggle to recover. Immediately, he let his hand off, not wanting even close contact. Turning to Abelia, gentle and kind, he warned that stairs were dangerous. Abelia laughed brightly, sincerely apologizing for her excitement about meeting her sister. She hugged Ksina, asking where they were going. In truth, this little sister was dearly loved by Ksina, but she was also the source of all Ksina's misfortunes, caused by their parents. Ksina sternly scolded Abelia for running on the stairs, almost causing her to fall. Abelia smiled innocently, confident her sister would catch her, showing her adorable naivety. However, Ksina, feeling down, murmured something inaudible due to her bad mood. Knocker was startled but paid no attention, and Abelia didn't hear either. Ksina regained her composure and gently said, "Abelia, go inside so the doctor can examine you, it's getting late." Abelia pouted, reluctant because Knocker was always fussing over her. Besides, she was getting better and wanted to play with her sister. She grabbed Ksina's dress, pleading to go. They looked truly happy as normal sisters. Ksina pulled her sister's hand away, telling her to behave, but her pampered nature meant Abelia clung to her, ignoring Ksina's orders not to let Knocker come here for nothing. The doctor hesitated with the girl, gently coaxing her, "I'm really sad if you leave, Abelia. The Duke commanded me to be here." Looking at them, Ksina felt a slight bitterness. Knocker advised, Miss Casina is busy, so you can't put her in a difficult situation. The little girl was now half sad and half resentful, murmuring sadly, I also want to be like Sister Casina, I also want to go out, it's really fun. Every innocent word from her younger sister made Casina's face darken. What did the girl say? Casina clenched her dress tightly to restrain herself and maintain her composure, as she had always done for her frail, naive sister. From a young age, Abelia was obsessed with her older sister Casina, following her everywhere. She was always feverish or catching colds, constantly demanding that her sister take care of her, even during tea parties. It piled up, and even though the girl recovered a bit, she never let Casina go anywhere. Casina almost drowned in loneliness because she had no kind friends, or even met anyone outside. Even when the twins were slightly older, and their older brother was away, Casina was abandoned right in her own home. On her birthday, there was a time when Infant fell, so Mom left all day to visit him, very worried. Although Casina was still a bit childish, she asked, why did Mom leave? Today is my birthday. But she didn't care. Casina also asked her father where her older brother was, but her father showed concern only for him. There were no congratulations, no hugs, just an indifferent remark. If she wanted presents, she should see the servants. Though young, Casina felt what it was like to be invisible and completely ignored. Yet, before her two siblings appeared in this house, little Casina was blissfully happy. They seemed like angels appearing before her eyes, treasures just discovered. Her mother gently told Casina, take care of your little siblings now, you're the big sister. Casina felt grateful and immediately accepted this important responsibility. She truly enjoyed having siblings, imagining the future with two little angels following her everywhere. But when one of the babies cried right after birth, Casina, not understanding, tried to inform her mother. To her surprise, her mother already knew and promptly dismissed Casina's words, sending her away and calling for the doctor. As they grew older, the girl Abelia was diagnosed as fragile, while the boy twin, born, thrived robustly. He always claimed whatever Casina had and stubbornly insisted on getting it. However, the only birthday gift their mother gave Casina was non-negotiable. This led to arguments where Casina, stronger but still naive, unknowingly pulled the gift away, causing Born to fall and cry in pain, his face turning red. Seeing him like that frightened Casina, but she hadn't meant to harm him, her heart raced, fearing both his injury and her parents' scolding. Hearing the cries, her mother stormed in, angry and shocked, directly scolding Casina. Even though she didn't know what happened, Casina explained she was just reclaiming what was rightfully hers from her brother. Her mother, furious, lectured her sharply, he's your younger brother, you must yield to him. Turning back, she comforted Born as a loving mother would. Casina stubbornly held on to her cherished gift, but Born continued crying. Her mother threatened to tell their father and scold Casina if she didn't give it up. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to do so and saw no reason why she should. Her mother, anxious, looked sternly at her, warning the young girl, behave like an elder sister, don't act like a child. In the end, in utter despair, Casina reluctantly yielded her most beloved possession to her younger brother. Since then, she hadn't received another gift. On another occasion, when Casina fell ill and felt dizzy, she sought her mother, who was busy with embroidery and initially cold. Casina, however, honestly explained her condition, feeling feverish. Her mother, sensing her warmth, mentioned Abelia's fever and the doctor's ongoing examination. She stopped her sewing, lifting Casina for the first time since the birth of her siblings. Casina felt joy despite her discomfort. The child smiled brightly. Eventually, her mother returned to her loving ways. Yet, just then, the housekeeper's voice echoed outside, announcing the doctor's desire to speak with the mistress regarding Miss Abelia's condition. Her mother set Casina down and assured her, someone's calling, I must go now. Go back to your room, I'll come to you later. She always said, as the elder, you should be able to stay alone. Casina, in her feverish state, pleaded to be taken to her room, but her mother insisted, you're well enough to walk back on your own. And from then on, she never once entered Casina's room. She endured it all just to hear a word of praise, opening her heart to seek even a sympathetic glance from them. Thus, Casina grew up learning to yield to her fragile younger sister as the healthy elder sister. Yielding to her troublesome younger brother as the obedient elder sister. Yielding to her brother living far away as the younger sister. Ultimately, in this household, her parents always believed that a second daughter like Cassina should learn to yield. From then on, she locked away her emotions, shutting out everything that outsiders called family affection, sibling relationships, or even parental love. For Cassina, it was as if they didn't exist. From a young age, she decided after turning 10, without needing to say or ask for anything, even nearing death, another door opened for Cassina to find new happiness and focus, which was drawing. Spending entire days immersed in colors and paper, it lifted her spirits, providing a sense of release. At that time, Cassina didn't even realize she was emitting a wondrous power. Nobody taught her how to use this miracle, that by wasting it like this, she was killing herself. She just wanted to make this household happier, to be noticed a bit more. Like that, Cassina exhausted her vitality drawing everything, from this to that. She made them vivid, feeling happy and satisfied. Just as she finished a painting, a butterfly broke through the cocoon and flew away. Everything seemed like a dream to Cassina. Naturally, with a child, if they discover their own talents and miracles, the first thing they do is show their parents. Cassina was no different. She quickly took her painting to show her parents, secretly hoping they would be delighted, embrace her like before her two siblings arrived. As she ran down, Cassina saw her mother happily and excitedly holding news about her brother Infix, that he was achieving well and would be coming home soon. Cassina felt happy too, her parents were endlessly proud. With faith, hoping her parents would praise her too, Cassina showed her painting to her mother. But the painting no longer had the butterfly she had originally drawn on it. Her mother glanced coldly for a second, then reluctantly replied, "Very beautiful," before turning back to discuss with her father about organizing a party for Infix's confirmation and celebrating Abelia's slightly improved health. Joy multiplied for their family. Cassina felt dejected, losing all spirit. For them, siblings were a source of double joy. But for her? In Cassina's mind, she always wondered, they are my parents, why won't they look at me even once? And so Cassina lived past the age of 20. Time had turned wounds into scars, no longer bleeding. Sometimes, when she peacefully painted in her room, her mother would find her. She would sharpen her tongue and ask, "Why does Abelia have this? Why does Abelia have that?" Even though everything was placed on the shelf. Cassina wanted to explain that she didn't take them, nor did she make them, but she couldn't. Those tiny hands and innocent face seemed pitifully defenseless. Instead of believing Cassina, her mother naturally believed her young, cute sister. Cassina's heart grew colder. She never listened to her, so Cassina had to admit and apologize. Eventually, she would be scolded severely. And all of Cassina's issues always had to be postponed. When her birthday approached, it had to be postponed because her older brother had just graduated. Cassina sneered. Her brother was always excellent, while her paintings were worse than rubbish in her parents' eyes. When it was time to organize a coming-of-age tea party, it had to be postponed because her little sister fell ill. It didn't matter. They firmly believed Cassina was always good. Cassina would yield for her sister, Cassina would do it for her brother. She no longer felt any agitation. That's just how they were, and Cassina was always healthier, wasn't she? That's why Cassina immersed herself more and more in painting. Every moment, every instant, she painted, forgetting to eat and drink. Cassina realized that as long as she painted sincerely, it would come alive. Whether it was a dog or even a simple picture, it could come to life. Its existence might be short, a moment or a day, then vanish. But for Cassina, that was enough. Instead of being part of a supposed family bloodline, she can't call them. When she was sick, she had to drag herself back to her room. When she struggled and felt abandoned, that's how her parents were. Feeling like crying out of frustration, these indifferent dogs or fairies would listen to Cassina more. They always stayed by a lonely person in their own home like Cassina. That's why she drifted further and further away, immersed in her paintings. At some point, like now, she had to pay the price with her life just to be heard and cared for. The price the heavens exacted from her was indeed steep. Cassina turned her head, bidding farewell to her little sister and the physician. As she turned away, her expression was visibly grim. She was nauseous but had to endure it. Little Abelia was still so innocent, asking her to have fun and bring something back to eat. The older sister's voice echoed softly, "I want to eat skewered meat and drink fruit juice." Knocker stood aside, afraid that the little girl might fall, so she carefully held her back. In reality, Cassina didn't hate her sister, she deeply cared for her, so she indulged her every wish. Little Abelia was as happy as an angel. It's just that sometimes, angels can lead people into despair. Arriving at the mansion's trail, Cassina felt so worthless that even her former sister walked away feeling jealous. Being someone nearing death, she blamed herself for her inherent gentleness. She couldn't harm anyone. Cassina's purpose in coming out today was to meet the doctor who had previously diagnosed her. When he saw her, he quipped, "Did you decide to live for just one day, that's why you're here?" Cassina chuckled brightly, "No, sir, I'm here to get medicine." The doctor looked puzzled. "Medicine? What for?" Cassina explained that she had planned a trip and needed medicine for at least 2 months. "I've never truly lived life on my own terms, so now I want to live differently," Cassina asserted firmly, resembling a solid rock. He asked seriously, "Where does the girl want to travel so I can prepare?" Quickly, Cassina replied that she wanted to go to the far north, to the Genta territory. The doctor was taken aback, almost choking on his water. He wiped his hands, composed himself, and with a gleaming smile, sincerely told Cassina, "If this young lady want to die soon, I can provide a certain type of medication right now." You could tell he was getting annoyed. Cassina remained silent. He waved her away, saying, "If you're looking for death, go somewhere else, my place doesn't sell defective goods." Cassina quickly and with difficulty explained, "That's not it, I just want to travel at the end of my life, do things I haven't had a chance to do." Moreover, she wanted to ask if there was a safe way to get there. Cassina timidly asked the doctor, "Just need it to be safe. I definitely won't drown or anything, planning to get there within 2 months. He rubbed his chin, thinking aloud, "If you rest at an inn for a day or 2 in between, you might make it in a week." The doctor sighed, sat back, and asked Cassina, "Why the far north and not somewhere else?" "It's freezing there, borny chilling." Cassina smiled wryly, "It's okay, because someone I want to find is there. Besides, if it's cold in winter, I'll just stay indoors, so no worries." He sighed again, looking at Cassina like a child yet to experience life, and asked, "When are you going?" Cassina hesitated, fidgeting with her fingers, "It'll be a week from now." The doctor nodded sympathetically, "That's quite soon," then mused, "Well, there's a way. Although life may be hard, it doesn't deteriorate that quickly. This medicine can sustain you for 2 months. If you stop taking it, it could become critical, so come back here for it when the time comes." Cassina was overjoyed, knowing that the medicine would be enough for 2 months. She was extremely grateful for that. Leaving more than 10 pieces of gold behind, the doctor didn't understand why she left the money there. Cassina smiled brightly and said, "Thank you for treating me, and consider it payment for the medicine." He hesitated but eventually returned the money to Cassina, say that he hopes she wouldn't die and would come to see him next time. The doctor scratched his chin, perplexed, how can she be so carefree in her life? However, young ones like her give up quickly. Cassina felt a warm glow despite being dismissed by him. It was heartening that strangers could care for each other like this. She began to wander outside to find a horse carriage, excited because in a week, she could travel alone. While walking, she caught the aroma of delicious grilled meat, almost mesmerizing a girl who seemed lost and near death. Cassina quickly returned to the stall. The owner promptly greeted her with a tempting array of skewers, so appetizing that one might come back to life just to devour them. Remembering Abelia's desire for skewers earlier, Cassina kindly asked the owner to pack 2 skewers. She thought to herself, Abelia will surely love these. But as she boarded the horse carriage, the bustling noise outside grew louder. At that moment, the image Cassina always longed for appeared before her eyes, a woman on the road, anxiously caring for her child. Cassina realized she had never felt such warmth since having her siblings. She remembered Abelia saying, "You get to go out every day, how wonderful," which unsettled Cassina emotionally. She knew Abelia cared for her, but whether intentional or not, her jealousy over Cassina's freedom was hard to bear. Nevertheless, Cassina remained composed, fulfilling her duties and responsibilities as an elder sister to care for her two younger siblings. Upon returning to the mansion, she found Bourne playing something. She wasn't sure what game it was, but one thing was certain: Cassina would be the first to be reprimanded if anything went wrong. The boy greeted her eagerly as she called him over. Swiftly approaching, he immediately noticed the skewers in Cassina's hands. His mouth watered uncontrollably. Bourne swiftly grabbed the packet from her. The packet was a bit heavy, so let me help to carry it. Cassina chuckled softly at his antics. Hurry and take it inside, she said. There's also a portion for Abelia, she asked me to buy. With that, another dull day of Cassina's ended. Watching the carefree and indifferent Bourne, she couldn't help but feel powerless. Exhausted from the day, Cassina retreated to her room for a brief rest. Unknowingly, she slept until nightfall. Just as she drifted into deep sleep, she was startled awake by someone calling her angrily, their voice echoing throughout the castle. Dazed and confused, she found her father standing there, his face stern and eyebrows furrowed in anger. In the cold, dimly lit room in the dead of night, her father and the rest of the family had gathered not out of concern but to interrogate her. He sternly asked Cassina if she had given Abelia food from stressed foods outside. Cassina admitted it and looked back at him, waiting for his scolding. Why was she showing concern only for her and not for her sister, allowing her to eat such messy food? Even her younger brother, Bourne, looked worried for his elder sister. Cassina felt a pang of remorse and wondered what had led to her being suddenly summoned to her room. It turned out it was about Abelia, but because she had asked Cassina to buy it for her. Cassina asked about her condition and learned that she had vomited and was dehydrated. Only with the doctor's help did she recover, but she was still in very bad shape. He criticized Cassina as a heartless person. Her mother added, "Now that you're an adult, how could you be so careless?" Cassina quickly wanted to explain, "It's because Abelia asked me to buy it, it's all her fault." However, this house fundamentally never listened to her even for a single word. Father interrupted loudly, believing Cassina was making excuses. At this moment, he viewed Cassina as an enemy because of Abelia, his youngest daughter. Bourne saw his sister being scolded and wanted to explain, but he spoke out of turn. Father continued to scold Cassina, each word hitting home. She gritted her teeth, thinking, "It's okay, just apologize, just endure like always and it will all pass." But why did she have to endure this alone? Cassina turned cold and questioned her father, "So what?" Her gaze turned sharp, any hint of affection disappearing. Cassina's father was startled because this was the first time his daughter had ever talked back, and her tone was cold. Disbelieving, he asked, "What are you saying?" Cassina repeated her words sharply, "What if it's true? What do you want me to say?" Cassina's emotions were a mix of anger and hatred. She spat out each word, "If Abelia is having issues, what can I do about it, father?" She gripped her dress tightly. How much longer did she have to endure this? A year, until the day she died? Would she be freed after death? Her father continued, "Cassina, how can you be so disrespectful?" She boldly retorted, "It was Abelia who asked me to buy it, and she didn't tell me she wasn't feeling well and couldn't eat those things." Once again, her father was shocked, continuing to criticize, "As an older sister, you should care more about your sibling." Cassina cut him off directly, "If it were Abelia, I would do it, but there's no way I would know she couldn't eat those things if she didn't tell me." Her mother, standing to the side, believed that Cassina was being disrespectful, as she was speaking to her father in such a confrontational manner. How could she remain polite? Cassina snapped, "If it was Abelia, she would have done it without being told." Her mother thought Cassina was being unreasonable for talking back to her father. Bourne was surprised, looking hesitant. Cassina felt a headache coming on. She retorted to her mother, "I don't think I did anything wrong other than speaking my mind. At least I didn't make noise in the middle of the night." Her father, frustrated, cut in, "You should have let the doctor check those things before eating them." Cassina replied sharply, "What things, father? Even Bourne and I ate them without any problems. Next time, I'll pay more attention and take care of Abelia." This time, Cassina didn't apologize. Her father, tired, didn't scold her anymore and reminded her to be more careful. After the chaotic scene, they all turned their backs and left. Despite everything, they loved Abelia the most and wanted to visit her. Before leaving, her father turned back and added, as the older sister, you should be more considerate. Abelia isn't well, you know? Despite any dissatisfaction, you're still healthy. So please understand. He didn't know that he had more than one sick daughter. Cassina sat silently for a long time, not reacting, clutching her skirt tightly. Partly in pain, partly having to endure these people. Cassina's face was dark, only managing to say, yes. Healthy, what a curse! Cassina was angry, resentful, and pitted herself deeply. Was being healthy a crime to them? Even Born and her brother Infit were healthy. Why was she the only one who had to endure this? Seeing their daughter's expression, the Duke and Duchess exchanged glances, both bewildered and uncertain. The mother turned back, pretending to console, your father spoke like that because he's worried about your sister. Besides, he's a bit agitated. Please understand him. She then looked at the daughter, who hadn't shown any emotions for over 10 years, calmly advising, Cassina, you won't mind, will you? Cassina replied with just one word, yes. When someone has completely shut their heart, even their words towards those they despise become restrained. Only once more, Cassina wanted to ask her mother something, is that all you wanted to say to me? The Duke and Duchess immediately paused. The Duke turned back, asking, what did you say? Cassina coldly asked, do you even remember where my room is? You've never been here in all these years. I thought you'd forgotten. Facing the Duke and Duchess now was a daughter nearing death, unloved by her parents who even criticized her near-death state as too healthy. Truly, life can be ironic. The two of them froze, pupils dilating in shock because their daughter had been emotionally dead to them for a long time. There were no tears left to shed. Cassina coldly dismissed them, please leave, Duke and Duchess. Send my apologies to Abelia for the unnecessary fuss. I also wish to rest. And so, the door between this family officially closed. Cassina was no longer the Cassina she once was. She had to live out the rest of her life as merely a decorative piece in the household, alive or not, it didn't matter. Disheartened, she buried her face in the blanket, sighing deeply, feeling miserable. What had she done wrong? She didn't know if Abelia was in trouble, but if she had passed, Cassina was probably just as indifferent, given her recent apathy. Cassina lingered in this house, struggling amidst the bedding, seemingly inconsequential to anyone. Suddenly, she sat up. She couldn't afford to feel like this. Overwhelmed by anger and pain, Cassina hurriedly searched for paper and colors. Almost out of crayons, she had evidently been drawing more and more lately. She started to paint, depicting what was in her mind, a door, a window frame, a roof. She focused on painting with all her sincerity, adding clouds and coloring them. A miraculous phenomenon began. Golden light enveloped Cassina. This was the sign of a miracle arriving. Cassina's eyes blurred, breathing became difficult, hurried, sweating profusely. Her eyes gleamed, evidence that the miracle had been completed. Finally, it's done. A fairy in a sparkling green dress with tiny wings sat proudly on the windowsill. The little fairy stood up, fluttered her wings lightly. She flew out of the painting thanks to Cassina's ability to regenerate. Her joyful spirit returned. Yes, no matter how many wounds they inflicted, she only needed to repaint. This was the only lifeline for someone dying of an artistic illness, because drawing too much would kill them. Even if life was exhausting, she couldn't let go. The next morning, Cassina wore her most beautiful red dress from her wardrobe. Even the servants were happy because today Miss was joining the family for breakfast. After all, the twin siblings had come and begged Cassina. Born apologized for causing trouble last night, and Abelia tearfully admitted it was her fault and begged her sister to come to breakfast. So Cassina came. Despite her unhappiness, everyone else was cheerful. Today was also the last day she would see them in this life. A breakfast at the Duke's house was always extravagant, filled with high-quality meats. But Cassina, with her weak digestion, could only eat salad. The Duke sipped his wine and asked, your birthday is in 2 days, isn't it, Cassina? Ah, so her birthday was approaching, even the owner had forgotten. But she knew what he would say next. The Duke slowly said that it coincided with Infix's holiday, so he wanted to postpone and organize an outing. Ksenia sarcastically replied, "Indeed, 10 years as one, they never realize how excessive they are." Ksenia calmly replied, "Everyone can do as they please. But I can't participate because I have other plans." The Duke angrily scolded her at the table. What could be more important than family events? Outraged, Ksenia stood up and asked everyone to leave, saying, "Go and enjoy yourselves, don't worry about me anymore." And of course, they never got another chance. As Ksenia ran out of the room, she knew that the next time she faced this so-called family, she would only be a shell. But why couldn't she be happy on her last day? She ran back to her room and wrote a brief note. "I intended to speak to them honestly before leaving, but this final memory is too bitter. Despite everything, they were still family, so I want to leave a few words. That's all that's left now, just a note saying I've left." Ksenia didn't say where she was going or what she would do. After that, Ksenia turned and left. Ironically, they were still happy, busy caring for their precious children in the dining room. The room fell silent as if a person had never been there. Returning to the present, after 2 long months, Ksenia finally arrived at the Duke's domain. She set aside her bag and worn-out shawl. Bathing in warm water, she felt grateful that despite his dislike for her, the Duke hadn't turned her away. This moment of relief amidst the pain reminded her of the Duke's warmth beneath his cold exterior. A little while ago, he was even preparing her room. But first, he was rather rude, commenting on her odor and telling her to go shower. Well, when the host speaks, you have to listen. Ksenia obediently went to shower. Having traveled a long way, the doctor's medicine given earlier had run out. Ksenia closed her eyes, resting. Before, she would take the medicine when there was a lot, but stopping for a while shouldn't be a problem, right? Looking at the bottle, only 3 pills remained, Ksenia pondered. If she didn't take them, she might relapse, possibly even more severely, like a long-suppressed eruption. If nothing happened, she would soon feel weak, possibly even tonight, her health declining. If her temperature got too high, she could take a pill every other day. She could sleep as much as she liked when tired. After all, it was evidence Ksenia was gradually dying, and she was comfortable with that. Her spirits were light, and she rearranged the towels a bit. Despite being a noblewoman, she was accustomed to doing this herself. Her feet were still wet from the shower, but she felt refreshed. She was doing what she wanted now. She wondered how her father would feel seeing her so free. This journey had shown her many interesting things, even made her happy. Though she only had a year left to live, it was enough for her. It was good in its own way, surely, except for the Duke here. Ksenia was invited into Mion's office to clarify everything. The room was filled with the smell of ink and books, and Mion seemed quite ill-tempered. Ksenia cried without tears, "Is that because you decorated the room and now you're glaring at me so angrily?" Mion gestured for Ksenia to sit and began to get to the point. The butler knew how to serve tea well. Mion started asking, "Why are you here?" His annoyed demeanor was trademark Mion. He couldn't even relax his eyebrows when talking to his fiancée. Ksenia laughed bitterly. Do I really need an answer? In truth, she didn't want Mion's pity, so she deliberately hid the real reason, deeper still than her regular concealment. To Ksenia's subconscious, revealing her troubles to others would only cause inconvenience. Mion grew irritated every 3 sentences. He frowned. Are you just going to stay silent like that? If you want to survive, at least try to persuade me with some reason. He looked so terrifying that Ksenia dared not speak. Mion guessed again. Are you having issues with your family? The words family made Ksenia feel indignant and shivering. She held her skirt tightly. Mion continued to probe Ksenia's pain. For a small girl like you to come all the way north, there must be some deep discord with the noble family, right? Ksenia's heart sank, falling into a deep abyss at Mion's words. True and not true. Only when there's affection is there discord. If you're a stranger from the start, how can there be discord? Ksenia only hoped for one thing, to depart peacefully, which is why she couldn't stay with her family if she wanted a quiet end to her life. Looking at the warm tea, Ksenia wondered if they would regret or feel guilty when she passed away. She hoped so, even if it was selfish and cruel. She softly expressed part of her thoughts. Everyone needs time to ease their pain. Mion sighed. changing the subject, if you stay here, I won't be able to care for you, as winters here are very busy. This isn't the right time. Kusina bloomed with excitement. That's even better, Mion thought, relieved to avoid boredom and confusion. What could this petite girl be thinking? Could this spirited and stubborn girl be the same one from the engagement party? She seemed so different, so extraordinary. Kusina chuckled happily, wanting to ask the Duke for one more thing, her own room. Anywhere would do, because the Duke disliked her so much that living nearby and encountering him daily would be inconvenient. Mion replied, there is a room, but it needs to be cleaned up. Kusina puzzled, is it very dusty? Certainly not, the Duke promptly denied. Then there's no need to clean anything, just a bed and a fireplace will do. Kusina led a simple life. Mion helplessly instructed the steward, quickly prepare what she asks for. And that room will do, so she can move in right away. Kusina sighed in relief at the successful clearance, thinking the Duke would be difficult. However, Mion reminded Kusina not to go out in winter because of the rampant mythical beasts in the north. Kusina readily agreed, saying, I'll stay in the room anyway. Reluctantly, she asked for leave to rest. Mion agreed without hesitation. Kusina was very grateful, but Mion bluntly said, I just want you gone, no need to thank me. As Kusina approached the door, she paused, feeling she should say something more. Turning back, she awkwardly smiled, I apologize for intruding and causing trouble. After the petite girl left, the room became quieter, with only the steward and Duke Mion contemplating her. Kusina struggled outside for a while, her body resisting. It was indeed a miracle she could walk, just as the doctor had said. Now she felt a little dizzy. On her first night at the Duke's mansion in the chilly north, Kusina found it cold. She couldn't stop tossing and turning under the blanket, fully covered but still cold. Though it was dark, there was a clear light across the way, shining directly into Kusina's eyes. She wondered if there might be something warm to find. Wrapping herself in a thin pink scarf, she took a lantern and wandered in search of the kitchen. She reminded herself to bring hot water and a towel up first for self-care. The mansion was much larger than the Duke's estate, making it somewhat difficult to find. Feeling lost without knowing where the kitchen was, a sudden clang made her heart skip a beat in the eerily silent space. She jokingly wondered if something spooky might suddenly appear in this grand old mansion. Kusina kept walking forward, relying on the flickering light of her lantern. Just then, a dark figure slowly emerged and called out to her. Startled, she screamed and instinctively swung the lantern into their face with all her might. Mion immediately shouted, Calm down, it's me. Fortunately, Kusina hadn't panicked to the point of mistaking a person for a monster. She glanced over and saw Duke Mion there, glaring suspiciously. Little girl, couldn't sleep and decided to roam around? Kusina took a deep breath, relieved that the fear had passed. Then she noticed a problem. First, she apologized, but also wondered why the Duke was here, looking so humble and hesitant like a little rabbit. Mion smirked, avoiding direct eye contact, scratching his head as he struggled to find an excuse to speak. He had a penchant for evasion. He lied, saying, because it seemed there was a problem with the heating system in the mansion, so I came to check. In reality, he was worried, which was why he came here. It was now dawn outside, though not completely bright. Winter here meant long days and short nights. Mion turned the question back to Kusina, asking why she was here so early. Kusina struggled to drum up a response, It's nothing, I just had a bit of errand, so I wandered around. I thought I saw a light, so I thought someone was here. Mion suddenly felt something was amiss. Why was she so evasive and unsteady, avoiding eye contact? Mion understood she was hiding something. He bluntly asked, What are you hiding, young lady? If there's something, just say it. He pressed on, trying to appear intimidating. Indeed, someone seasoned in battle would notice such things. Kusina hesitated and said, Nothing. She clutched her coat tightly, wanting to flee, but Mion wouldn't allow it. Struggling to refuse to answer and turning to run, Mion grew increasingly irritated. Nothing, you say? He frowned, annoyed. He grabbed her arm, feeling how hot she was. Kusina was surprised by the skinship from the Duke and didn't resist, just stared blankly. Even if she wanted to resist, it would be difficult. Someone accustomed to wielding swords against monsters had a strength beyond the ordinary. He pulled her into the moonlight to examine her more closely. Her breath was labored, sweat drenched her cheeks flushed so noticeably even in the dim moonlight. Her weak, trembling voice was a stark contrast to before. Mian concluded, Cassina, I must say, you are running a fever. Though still somewhat uncomfortable, Cassina, with vacant eyes and unsteady legs, replied, It's nothing, I just need some rest. Mian forced Cassina to stay and clarify, with a fever this high, shouldn't you have realized you were overexerting yourself when you arrived 2 months ago? Habitually harsh, the Duke scolded, why hide these things? Are you as foolish as a bear? Only dumb bears endure such things. Cassina retorted, what's this sick guy saying? Comparing me to a bear? Mian persisted, if there's something, you should speak up. You know on the battlefield, people who hide illnesses like you end up causing more trouble, right? Do you understand your mistake? Mian's reprimand was authoritative, almost like disciplining a subordinate. Cassina absent-mindedly apologized, then abruptly stopped herself. Wait, why is this guy suddenly catching me off guard and demanding apologies as if it's the right thing to do? Cassina realized and resisted, but before she could speak, Mian was quicker. He held his hand out in front of Cassina seriously and asked, how many fingers am I holding up? A simple task for most, but for Cassina, whose body was weakening, her vision blurred significantly due to the high fever. Thus, the number of fingers she saw was 6. But since he was holding up only one hand, Cassina reasoned, maybe 6 divided by 2 is 3, so it's correct. Confident in her blurred vision, she answered, 3 fingers. Hoping she was right. Mian incredulously looked back at his hand, I'm holding up 2 fingers, although I hold many swords, I have not fallen short with teachers. Cassina, with her limp, looked at the Duke for an answer. The result was that she was wrong. Mian was annoyed, unable to ease her mind as she continued to bring more trouble. Mian grumbled like an old man and then abruptly lifted Cassina. Startled, she said, it's okay, but the famous Duke was adamant, lie down. There are many patients here, so rest at my estate. Cassina hesitated but refused firmly, her face reddened from her fever. Mian scolded sharply, even if you dislike me, you have to accept, don't turn me into the bad guy. Eventually, despite her outward reluctance, Cassina agreed, though Mian remained deeply concerned for her. He hesitated, unsure if he was doing the right thing. Caring for monsters and soldiers was one thing, but caring for a girl was difficult. He told her, go to sleep, I'll call for someone to care for you. Cassina drifted into a feverish dream, insisting before she succumbed, absolutely do not call a doctor, promise me, absolutely do not. In the long moonlit corridor, Mian, purportedly disdainful of Cassina, carried her gently to her room. As he laid her down, she fell asleep immediately, her face flushed with fever, breathing heavily. She looked so painfully vulnerable that Mian couldn't understand. What had happened to this young girl and why did she have to endure this? Unconsciously, Mian reached out his hand, hesitated momentarily, then extended it again. He feared that such a delicate touch might shatter her. Thus unfolded the fateful encounter between them in the twilight of the female protagonist's life. After successfully escaping a loveless home due to being the unwanted daughter, Cassina had only 8 months left to live or perhaps less to do as she pleased. Therefore, she decided to leave her birthplace to peacefully pass away at Duke Million's estate, a man who openly despised her and was also her betrothed. 2 months ago. The main character's family didn't realize she had left until 2 days later. The servants were in a panic when they found a small piece of paper in the young lady's room, finally realizing she wasn't home. The Earl sat motionless and asked coldly, what's the matter? The maid reported that she hadn't seen the young lady anywhere. The Earl grumbled irritably, does she often go out without telling anyone? The maid apologized for assuming the young lady had gone out as usual. The butler timidly presented a handwritten letter found in the young lady's room during routine cleaning. The Earl showed disdain upon receiving the letter. Inside, there was only one short line, I am off on an adventure, father, signed by Cassina. Luckily, he hadn't been so absent-minded as to forget his daughter's signature. The Countess asked her husband, what's happening? Has our daughter gone off on an adventure without telling anyone? The earl became annoyed and coldly scolded, Cassina is a disobedient child. She's lived so comfortably at home, now she goes out without a word to her parents. He turned to the servant and asked, when was the last time you saw her? The servant hesitated, unsure how to respond. They vaguely mentioned seeing the young lady out 2 days ago, but yesterday they couldn't be sure. The maid looked pale because Cassina was so invisible in the house that they hadn't noticed her absence until now. If the maid hadn't reported it, she might have been missing for a year without anyone knowing. The earl rubbed his temples and asked, have the twins seen her these past few days? The twins were asked gently, but how cold often was for someone missing? Abelia and Bourne were still just children. They searched their memories to see if they had seen her in the past few days, but came up empty. Abelia thought she hadn't seen her, so she assumed she was out playing. Bourne thought she was at the market, so he hadn't paid much attention. Cassina's older brother understood her a little and suggested, perhaps she left because her outing coincided with her birthday and she was sad. In fact, when she left, her brother had followed and advised her to ease her heartache. If she was sad, she should just say it and not forget that their parents both loved her very much. Cassina looked at her brother, her face dark and cold, saying, they must allocate some affection for me due to my status as their biological child, but the child they truly care about isn't me. Putting the letter down, Infix tried to cover for his younger sister. She must have found it difficult to handle, which is why she left a note knowing that our parents would worry. But Cassina's mother remained calm while scolding Cassina, if you didn't like it, you could have just said so, there was no need for that trick. The earl ordered the steward, quickly gather a few servants and ask if they know where she went. He asked the steward, how much has our budget been depleted over the past 2 days? The total was just 2 gold coins, which meant Cassina had exchanged those 2 gold coins for cash in order to spend them. The count smirked, confident in his ability to anticipate the mischievous Cassina. If she only has that much money, she must be nearby. Don't bother bringing her back. Just 1 or 2 gold coins, no matter how frugal she is, will force her to come back here and ask for more. Cassina's mother, beside herself with worry, asked, is this okay? How will our little girl survive out there? As a mother, she couldn't help but feel concern for her child. The count, convinced that Cassina's rebellious streak was merely temporary, believed she would return after a few days of adventure. Used to a comfortable life, she likely just wanted a change of scenery. The count was sure that his wealth overshadowed everything, and Cassina was just another spoiled girl he could dismiss. In reality, a month later, subsequent reports proved him wrong. He erupted in his office, throwing everything to the ground in a fit of rage. He cursed his daughter's name as if it were that of an enemy. Cassina had been gone for a month, completely contradicting his initial expectations. He angrily exclaimed, does she even think? Surely, the count understands his daughter's situation. It's a bit pitiful, but concocting this stunt just for a birthday is too much. The steward reported seeing the young lady's carriage leaving the capital and disappearing. Grinding his teeth, he continued to curse his daughter. Despite his sadness and anger, he considered her escape attempt foolish. Hearing the commotion from the room, the countess entered to assess the situation. She worried more for her husband than for their daughter. Uncomfortably, he told his wife, Cassina has left the capital. She appeared anxious, asking, what does that mean? How could she leave the territory and go somewhere else? Meanwhile, the steward invited her to sit down to continue discussing with the count. He sighed, lamenting and scolding Cassina in every way possible. Such pointless antics from my daughter are truly annoying. The countess proposed, should we send more troops to find her? His answer was unequivocal, leave it be. He believed sending more troops would be a waste of money since she couldn't have gone far. He threatened, if she returns, I'll ban her from entering until she begs for forgiveness. If she dares to leave, she'll have to fend for herself. The count ordered the steward, anyone who continues to pursue her, keep going, no matter the cost. I don't care. The countess tried to justify her daughter's actions, saying, this time, Cassina acted thoughtlessly, but it was because she was too upset. The count redirected his anger towards his wife, it's also because you spoiled her too much that she turned out like this. Who would believe she left home just because of a silly birthday? He hoped Casina would mature and return before things were exposed, potentially tarnishing the family's reputation. Instead of worrying about what might harm his daughter externally, he was more concerned about his own authority. A father of the year indeed, he worried less about his daughter's physical well-being and more about his own power. Then he inquired about the well-being of his beloved little daughter, Abelia, the child he cherished the most. He worried that with Casina missing, Abelia would feel lonely here and there. The composed countess reassured, the little one is fine. Though a bit sad, she's all right. Then she thought of Casina, wishing the girl could be half as resilient as Abelia. She was somewhat perplexed. After all, Casina was calm and profound, but why was she acting so immature now? The Count added, perhaps we've given her too much. Just one birthday causing such a fuss. Let's see how long this drama lasts. Don't think earning money is easy. Both of them were still ignorant of what was happening to their daughter who was struggling with illness. They still thought she had everything, from pocket money to whatever she wanted to buy. But they forgot one thing, Casina wasn't a pet raised with money. While they casually criticized their own flesh and blood, Casina was battling illness. Initially, she had been alone in that house for year to year, with no one caring or knowing. Now, as she opened her eyes, she suddenly realized she wasn't alone anymore, but had two people in the room. Looking at the chair by the window in the room, Duke Mion was sitting there reading documents. His wrinkled face and red eyes were his unmistakable trademark. He was indeed the Duke, no mistake. Startled, Casina exclaimed, it's really the Duke. She quickly pulled the blanket over her face, embarrassed. Unexpectedly, the Duke was still there, grumbling, quick, lie down, the fever hasn't gone yet. Confused and sweating profusely, Casina asked Mion, why are you here? Mion grumbled dismissively, why do you think I'm sitting here? He slowly approached, grumbling further, you wouldn't let me call a doctor, and at this hour, who else could I summon to care for you? So I had to bring documents here. Casina couldn't believe her eyes as she looked at the Duke. Is he really do that? Keeping his promise not to call a doctor and then coming here to take care of me? His face contorted with sarcasm, Mion asked Casina, what do you think? Am I so free that I abandoned my duties just to count stars with you? Casina peeked out from under the blanket, ashamed, and asked Mion, do you find me bothersome? The Duke, a bit stiffly, responded, are you implying that caring for a patient is a bother? Mion sternly explained, you are the guest, and I am the host. Your promise has been fulfilled, which is not to call for a physician. Therefore, now you should behave as a guest. Casina laughed cheerfully and obediently listened. Even though her body felt as if it were burning and tearing apart, she truly felt incredibly happy. Mion awkwardly comforted Casina, you are in my house, so taking care of you is only natural. Don't grumble and behave like a guest. His voice was somewhat gruff and rude, but ultimately, he was comforting her. Casina found Mion truly endearing for his hot and cold temperament. Mion, in turn, confessed to Casina, I've never taken care of anyone before, so you'll have to bear with me. I only know to bring up a basin of water and bring down your fever for you, but it hasn't worked yet. Casina teased, is this your first time taking care of someone? Mion snapped, asking the obvious. I am a duke, after all. How could I possibly care for anyone? She remained cheerful despite the Duke's annoyance, saying, this is the first time someone has cared for me while I've been sick. Normally, I'm the one taking care of others. Mion grasped a crucial point, this was the first time she had been ill and someone had cared for her. The Duke's expression darkened as he pondered this. Casina had mentioned that there was a sickly adopted daughter in her household. In royal circles, if a family member fell ill but was still cherished, someone else would inevitably be sacrificed. Love within that household must have been imbalanced, and unwittingly, Casina was the one cast aside. Casina sincerely thanked him, someone who disliked her but cared for her genuinely from childhood to now. Mion urged Casina to rest further, saying, you still have a fever, and I don't know what else to do. At this point, Casina remembered and told him she had brought medicine but forgot to take it. Mion brushed aside the scattered papers to tend to the sick, now amused that she had forgotten her medication. Casina laughed and handed him a vial of medicine from her pocket. I've had it with me these past few days. There are 3 pills left, taking them should help. Upon hearing this, Mion swiftly turned to fetch the medicine. I can't have a sick guest in my house, was the Duke's only thought. Suddenly, Cassina grabbed his hand to stop him. Mion, don't go. The warmth from Cassina's touch was genuine, enough to make even the stern and chilly Mion blush. Indeed, for decades, she was the first girl to sincerely hold the Duke's hand. Mion collected himself and said, Cassina, don't be stubborn. You're still running a high fever, so I must get the medicine. Cassina shrugged, I don't like it. Even the strong-willed warrior like Mion had to concede defeat. He sat down with a grunt, muttering, your stubbornness is tougher than cow tendons. Seeing his annoyed expression made Cassina chuckle mischievously. Perhaps she found some amusement in being the first to say, I don't like it to someone. They had only met twice, yet now they were inexplicably concerned for each other. Mion ordered her, go to sleep. It's still early, and you're still ill. Stay up and you won't recover. Cassina, fearing Mion might leave while she slept, playfully resisted his advice. Helpless, the Duke didn't know how to persuade women and ended up acquiescing to her every wish. Gripping her small hand firmly with his rough ones, Mion sincerely promised, I won't go anywhere. Just rest. I'll stay until Butler Jean arrives. I assure you. Cassina smiled contentedly at him. Having someone stay by her side like this felt like an unexpected birthday gift. She obediently drifted off to sleep, her hand still firmly grasped by the man. Occasionally, he smiled at her dreamily. Mion sat there, holding her hand as promised, steadfast in his presence. Considering her feverish state and health, Mion contemplated sending a letter to the Countess to arrange Cassina's departure, but her condition seemed severe. With winter settling in, travel was difficult, and sending her back in such a state wouldn't be wise. For Cassina's sake, he decided to let her stay a few more months until she regained her health. The first night together had rooted something between Cassina and Mion, unnoticed by either. Time passed quickly, Cassina's fever and delirium persisted for over a week. The Duke visited her every day without fail. During this time, Cassina could only stand briefly, panting even with slow steps. Contrasting her worsening health from when she arrived, Mion became more caring than ever. Every day, he checked on her, his hand on her forehead to measure her temperature, almost like a habit. It made Cassina feel warm inside, despite her external discomfort. Mion was genuinely pleased when her fever finally broke. He laughed in excitement, proud of the progress after a week of diligent care. Yet, whenever Cassina looked at him, she seemed wary, like a rabbit afraid of being eaten. Mion chuckled softly, reassuring her, I'm not going to eat you. Shall we go have lunch now? Cassina nodded lightly in agreement. She glanced at the Duke, fearful of becoming a burden, so she tried not to ask for too much. But he proved more attentive than she initially imagined. Mion was still mindful that Cassina couldn't move quickly, so he told her he would wait outside while she changed slowly. After a while, the two got ready to eat. Mion reminded Cassina that he was the only one here and he often went to battle, so she should stay at the mansion without needing to go anywhere. Cassina wondered if she might just be a hindrance if she went with him to battle. Mion glanced sharply and asked, what would a girl like you achieve by going out and fighting? Cassina laughed, he was such a straightforward guy, showing everything openly, which suited her just fine. She assured him she had no intention of doing so he needn't worry. Mion also had a question for Cassina. He asked, do you like drawing? Because in the bag you brought here, there were only art supplies, so I thought you must really like drawing. Cassina was extremely surprised, not because Mion knew this about her, but because he noticed her love for drawing, unlike her family who never paid attention no matter how much she boasted or complained. Cassina gently admitted that she did enjoy drawing a little. Mion smiled and boasted to her about a wonderful place for drawing. If she liked, she could go up to the roof of the mansion, there was a beautiful spot there for drawing at sunset and sunrise. Cassina thanked him. Suddenly, Mion remembered something he wanted to tell Cassina, but before he could, they bumped into each other. Cassina's frail body made it easy for the Duke to catch her. He quickly let her go and apologized. Cassina rubbed her forehead where it had hit his solid chest, assuring him she was fine. She asked what he wanted to say earlier. It turned out Mion had instructed Kasina to bring a coat or shawl when going up there because mornings and evenings were cold with a north wind blowing. He also advised her to inform the butler an hour in advance. Moreover, when up there, she must not stay too long, returning within an hour. Hearing Mion's stern instructions, Kasina boldly guessed that the servants and soldiers probably disliked him for his irritable nature. Mion saw Kasina's puzzled expression and scolded her gently, "If there's anything, you should let me know, don't clam up like a dried squid." That was the nickname the Duke Mion had given Kasina since they met during the engagement ceremony. She had often wondered about that nickname and asked him about it. He explained that during the engagement ceremony, she had trailed after the servants so blatantly that it was obvious she had no genuine willingness, guessing correctly that she was coerced. "If you hate it, just say so, why make yourself miserable?" Kasina was surprised it was true. Her face became slightly somber as she explained to the Duke, "Actually, that day, I had a reason. The marriage was decided without ever asking for my opinion even once, my parents just decided. On the engagement day, my younger sister fell ill, so they couldn't come, and only the servants accompanied me." Kasina bowed in apology, "I'm sorry, Duke, if I made you uncomfortable that day." Mion shrugged, his voice softening, "That day, I wasn't upset, I just didn't want to see you forced into something. I'm partly to blame for blindly following ancestral teachings without considering your feelings. Anyway, I just want to say one thing, if there's anything you dislike, don't want, or even hate, tell me everything." For the first time in her life, Kasina had someone actively allowing her to speak out about things she didn't like, allowing her to express her true feelings. It turned out that sometimes the person who disliked her the most cared for her the most, while those she thought had a family heart were not as caring. But Kasina fell into contemplation. The first thing she wondered was whether speaking out about not liking the engagement would affect Abelia. Even though she knew it wouldn't, Kasina couldn't stop thinking about others, couldn't seek even once for herself. Mion gradually lost patience, so he didn't wait for Kasina anymore. He asked her if she had any food preferences or dislikes. Kasina was relieved that he didn't delve deeper into the previous issue. She replied that she only ate light dishes, not rich in fat. Mion teased, "It seems like you only eat light dishes just like your demeanor." As he spoke, he opened the dining room gate. Inside, the soft light of the setting sun made it look very warm. This was no ordinary dining room, it was a special room that the Duke had built. Kasina was completely captivated by the unique architecture here. It was a glass greenhouse with transparent mirrors that could see outside and seemed insulated. Proudly, Mion introduced, "This is the type of architecture studied by northern architects. Because winters here are very cold but beautiful with snow, this greenhouse allows you to admire the snow while keeping warm."